hi, I'm still pushing on here, putting the finishing touches on an affidavit, which I've been, for God's sake, just one moment. This is absolutely crap. Should have set myself up properly first. Excuse me, one moment. I can't do it. Look, I'm going to push ahead. You can see me there. I just thought that I would read one of the most condemning features of this egregious situation that I am in. Sorry about the lack of, sorry about being unkempt. I barely sleep and I get up and I get straight back into it again, and it's pretty much stopped for a dingo's breakfast, which is a piss and a quick look around. I've got a transcript here that I'm going to read from, and the highlighted part is, just a moment, I'll turn the radio down in case they back announce that. No. The highlighted part is this is part of a transcript in the family law court case, which I was made to self-defend whilst bleeding literally to death from a prolapsed submucosal fibroid, for my eldest child, who I had to a sperm donor, and that sperm donor has 4 children to 3 separate women over Australia, 2 of them being to Lauren Jackson, the basketball player, and 1 being to a lawyer in Melbourne called Louise, and 1 with me. And so he employed, as I have explained in these videos before, at the cost of some $250,000, to, after my mother died and my godfather, her stepbrother, murdered his wife 12 weeks later, and then my womb simultaneously grew a tumour into my cervix, causing 24/7 bleeding, and an emergency hysterectomy for which I had to sell my house because there was a 5-week public hospital wait list on which I would have died, and not like either of the fathers of my children that were still alive. That's the father still alive of my children, because my son's father was dead by this stage. Gave them an opportunity to say goodbye or hello to me, as I said yesterday, when I went under the knife of Dr. Jenny Cook on the 25th of May 2017, having just lost my daughter Madeline on the 28th of February 2017, so some 6 weeks earlier. In between, in March, my eldest child's father came back for a crack with his QCs, and this one's called Fowler. And this was before... you get a different judge every time, it seems, as I've told you in these broadcasts. And this is before Federal Magistrate Leanne Turner. Sorry, wrong one. Federal Magistrate Elizabeth Boyle, because Leanne Turner was the negligent moron who defied all Australian community standards of accepting police reports about men's violence when 3 women had reported requiring the police, and the police had taken out AVOs to protect them over 25 years. And so here we go. We've got a little bit of a transcript read here. And what's being said here by my eldest child's father's QC Fowler is that during the period of 2011 to 2013, my eldest daughter met the father of my youngest daughter on plenty of occasions, because he used to come around on weekends. This is a direct quote from the transcript, the Ausscript transcript. And then the QC goes on, she says, that's me, that during this period of time, notwithstanding her evidence of past abuse, and that's abuse by my youngest daughter's father, who's keeping my children from me for years and years now, that when my eldest daughter met the youngest daughter's father on plenty of occasions, because he used to come around on weekends, is that a concern in terms of perhaps a lack of insight the mother has as to how these relationships ... Because I interject at this point, self-defended, and I call out, bleeding to death, literally. I call out, objection, Your Honour. I had a child with the man and he is entitled to see her, or he was entitled to see her. Now, again, remember, these are laws of called the presumption of shared care that John Howard and that absolute piece of work Pauline Hanson brought in 2007 to the Family Law Court Act, where women were forced to share their children. Of course, we've had another woman murdered in the last 2 days, a young woman, 22, full of life, with all of her life ahead of her, a water polo teacher at St Andrew's Cathedral College, where my eldest daughter went before she graduated from the conservatorium, by the way. These are $40,000 a year schools. And of course, who was it? Wasn't a woman, was it? It was a man. And it was a man who had his penis inside her. So again, just as a quick detour, if you want to have a look at 5 of the world's best female comedians right now, I seriously suggest you check out Hannah Gadsby, Whitney Cummings, Catherine Ryan, Michelle Wolf, and Beth Stelling. And every single one of them, independent of each other, has managed to include the fact in all of their recent skits that I've watched on Netflix over the last 3 years that you are 95% most likely to be murdered by a man who knows you and whose penis has been inside you. Let's not forget that, ladies. They're slaughtering children over in the Middle East as we speak. Despite their Holocaust, they're perpetrating a Holocaust on 2.5 million population who are 50% children, so could not possibly defend themselves and have nowhere left to run. Men, 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 men. Men and their mendacious violence. Men murdering women, not the other way around. And yet here is some fuckwit called QC Fowler from a company called Super and Super. I hope somebody sends him this. Trying to put the blame on me for exposing my eldest daughter to my youngest daughter's father's violence, even though I was obliged by legislation at the time under John Howard and Pauline Hanson to do so in their presumption of shared care, or risk if I didn't give my child over to a man who had abused me and share time. So I had him come to my house most of the time where I could supervise him, because he was usually inebriated like my eldest father's child, who had to employ a driver whenever he came to pick her up on a Sunday night. Well, usually when he came to pick her up on a Sunday night, my eldest daughter would cling to my leg and not want to ever let go and not want to go with him. You can't make this shit up. So Elizabeth Boyle, federal magistrate in the Family Law Court in Sydney, then when I object and say, objection, Your Honour, I have a child with the man, my youngest daughter's father, who's keeping them from me for years now, and he's entitled to see her. And so Her Honour says, this is a direct quote in yellow here, Her Honour says, Elizabeth Boyle, what's being asked though is Alice's, my eldest daughter's, presence when Mr. Ian Little was present in your home. So I'm going to permit this question. Yes, Mr. Fowler? And so Mr. Fowler goes on with his prosecution and his inherent persecution of me for a man's violence. A man who I'd left whilst pregnant and worked my ass off 50 hours a week alone, wiping 4 children's bottom holes, bums, putting them in and out of high chairs, putting them in and out of cots, and complying with Julie Gillard's 350 pieces of regulation and the being, becoming, belonging legislation, and reporting to AEQA, the Australian Education Quality Standards, whatever it is. So Mr. Fowler continues, thank you. That's thank you, Your Honour, for letting me go on. Thank you. So would that perhaps indicate a lack of insight on the mother's part in terms of the effect it might have on Alice in exposing her to ongoing abuse? And then Quadrio, who's a Royal Commission psychiatrist who was a single expert witness in the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Molestation. She's an associate professor of psychiatry at UNSW. She's older now, in her 70s, and she was paid $15,000 to prepare a single expert witness report for my eldest child. And I've cross-examined her, and I won. I won my daughter back a tiny little bit, because by this stage I'd got about 20 minutes on the phone with her every fortnight. And this was from a sperm donor, my eldest daughter's child, because I thought I had endometriosis, so I looked around for people who wanted to have a child. And he did too, because he's had 4 with 3 different women. And so she permits this question. And so Quadrio, astonishingly, Associate Professor Quadrio, replies, I think so, yes. That is the question from QC Fowler on behalf of my eldest child's father. is, would that perhaps indicate a lack of insight on the mother's part in terms of the effect it might have on my eldest child, Alistair, exposing her to ongoing abuse? Presuming the abuse is happening in my house, because of course I ejected him from my house. It happened in his house when we lived together. And so she stupidly, unbelievably, Quadrio says, I think so, yes. And so QC Fowler, for $250,000 or the better part thereof, continues with, and what effect could that be, continuing exposure of my eldest daughter to ongoing abuse? This is abuse at the hands of a man who I'm only allowing into my home because the legislation of John Howard and Pauline Hanson's presumption of shared care obliges me to give that father some meaningful time, even though I owned a home on the Central Coast at 71 Viron Road, to which I could have lived and made them all travel up to see me, because the children were babies and young. And so Quadrio says, oh, well, I don't know how much abuse Alice actually saw, but if she at least saw the episode of her mother being dragged by the hair around the kitchen, and then for her to see that in spite of that experience, her mother continues a relationship with the man, that is certainly something that has a bad effect on a child's understanding of human relationships. Not like her father being pissed every Sunday night and picking her up, or going through women like towels would have that effect either. As he did, though he hasn't done that for a few years now. He's a rock star, you know. Men get away with that, but women, you're a fucking slut, aren't you? So then we've got, and what would that be? And so that's the question from the QC Fowler to psychiatrist Quadrio. What would that be? And she goes, well, children who are raised in households where they're exposed to family violence tend to go on in their adult lives and repeat similar patterns of relationships in their adult intimate relationships. So there's a tendency for a repetition of those patterns. I'm reading straight from the transcript. Now, if that's the case in the same Sydney Federal Family Law Court, in front of a different judge, a different one every lottery go, called Elizabeth Boyle, for my eldest daughter, when QCs were prosecuting the case, and when Quadrio had been paid, and you'd have to argue there's a conflict of interest here, surely. Quadrio, meant to maintain her reputation. So Quadrio accepts $15,000 on behalf of the father of my eldest child to prepare this report. And then under cross-examination from his expensive QCs, I'm self-defended and bleeding to death, remember, and I won my cross-examination of her subsequently too, because I proved how, isn't it curious, that men can headbutt each other and smash each other if they get a little bit pissed off because they got held too long in a tackle on the footy field, but that's totally normal, whereas you're trying to say that if I smacked my child twice in their whole life because they smashed their iPad when I asked them not to, or ran across the road in front of a car when they were holding my hand and bolted off, and so I freaked out. Normal within range things. Twice being smacked only a couple of times in your life does not rank as abuse at all by most normal people's standards, and certainly not historically. Although they're trying to criminalise it in every single way now, and it certainly is in the context of childcare. But I do digress yet again. So we've got proof to get to the crux of that point. We've got proof in one case that children who are exposed to family violence tend to grow up, essentially, my paraphrasing, expecting this in their adult intimate relationships. So if that's the case, then why on earth does my youngest child's father, with 3 AVOs taken out by police over a quarter of a century to protect 3 separate female partners, who was used by Friedman and his QC to try and further erode the scant amount of time my daughter at 12 years old, needing her mum in puberty, by then had with me. Even though that same man then assisted the father of my oldest daughter, then assisted the father of my youngest daughter to further take my youngest daughter off me by sharing hot tips and writing such emails as, of course, we don't tell the mother where we take her children in the holidays. She's been known to loiter at the local shops and on the beach looking for them. And when I said that yesterday and collapsed in tears afterwards, it's because I can't think too much of a sadder image on the planet than a mother wandering around it looking for her children, who she doesn't know where they lay their heads at night because they've been moved to residences without her being informed of where her children live. And then, to finish it off, spelt incorrectly, but a man I'd known since I was 17 years old, who'd been working with an Order of Australian Musician for 30 years, touring the planet, still going, and had been married for 26 of those years to the same woman, but had an argument with her, and he said something very stupid when he was drunk, and so an AVO was upheld on him by the police. But he was a gentle, kind, nice, loving guy to everybody on earth, except when he got drunk and had some joints, and he would often say cruel things, but never would touch a fly or harm a fly. But had nonetheless had an AVO put on him by his ex-wife. And at this stage we'd been together 5 years, and I'd known him since I was 17. And of course my oldest child's father, being a musician in the music industry, knows this person very well. And also, here's the killer, happens to be best friends with my partner's ex-wife's sister. So has got the inside run, as they call it in the horse races, on what's happened in the marriage, and that there's been an AVO gone on in the marriage. And so then they use my relationship with this man, who's never been violent to me and has reduced me to tears by saying cruel things when he's drunk and stoned, unfortunately, which I never was. I don't like pot, can't stand it. But they then try to rope a man who's been with the same woman all his life and never lifted a finger to her, but had an argument with her and said something stupid and had an AVO put on. And they used my cohabitation with him against me as well. So again, we're just going to finish it off a little bit more quickly today. Again, we've just got ample evidence in my case alone, let alone in everybody else's, like Jess Hill, the great journalist, reported on with the family law court, where she demonstrated clearly from reading 40 family law court transcripts that women were left who are left traumatised by being subjected to abuse by men, then come off poorly, looking like they've got mental health issues and problems in the family law court reporter's office. Now, Lucia Vardenega was the idiot who I'm intending to sue and get debarred from the family law court, because she knew all of this from my affidavit, and she had a chance also to read what's called the New South Wales police record, because it's subpoenaed mandatorily by the independent children's lawyer. I'm a bit husky because I attempted to sing some gospel belts last night and try and cheer myself up, and that was stupid. I didn't warm up, and I haven't slept, and I'm sick. So yeah, you can see right here in the transcript of Elizabeth Boyle's case that the mind-blowing hypocrisy of the father of my eldest child using the violence he knew I'd suffered and left whilst pregnant at the hands of my youngest child's father, but nonetheless aiding and abetting my youngest child's father to take my children from me and keep them from me against family law court orders in all school holidays and Easter and Christmas, all 12 weeks of the public school holiday calendar. And here we have it. The highest authority in Australia, or she's one of them, Associate Professor Carolyn with a Y, Quadrio, as you would expect it to be spelled, Quad, R-I-O, look her up, UNSW, Professor of Psychiatry, single expert witness relied on by the federal government in the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Molestation, said about me and my parenting and my eldest daughter's relationship that we loved each other dearly and deeply, and that whilst I showed a bitter and withering cynicism and black sense of humour one-on-one with her, that when my daughter came into the room, I sprung to life and was light-hearted and joked and affectionate. We can be more than one thing, ladies, remember? Men can be a great president while they're getting their cock sucked by 15 separate female staffers. Hello, Bill Clinton. But if Hillary had been elected and had 15 male staffers perform cunnilingus on her, you can only imagine how that would have gone down. There's a different rule for men, isn't there? And yet so Quadrio single expert witness into trauma in the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Molestation. So the federal government's own leading psychiatric expert in the federal court system prepares a report about me and my daughter. I cross-examine her, win my daughter back, but the QCs come in for the kill afterwards here and use my youngest child's violence against me, which I left and I didn't let him do in my home, left his home to escape pregnant. They use that against me as well as him, the oldest child's father, aiding and abetting the youngest child's father, to keep my children from me and make them all go on holidays together and see each other sometimes so that it looked to everybody else like they were at least still availing the children of a nice convivial cousin, family, half-sibling relationship maintenance continuation situation, but just mother nowhere to be seen. May as well fuck off back to Tasmania and die like he told me to. And he was stupid enough to write that down, so I've got a screenshot of that. So we have evidence, which I intend to use here. If you will fund me, because now I've got to go and ask for money again, don't I? There's actually a link. It's not change.org. I don't know why I said that yesterday. It's GoFundMe with my name, Danielle Farrow-Pryke. And I think before I collapse into any more puddles of tears, I'm going to keep today's one short and sweet because I am nearly at the end of this huge bunch of, that's not even the affidavit, that's just the attachments. They're called annexures when they're printed material in written form, or they're exhibits when there's something like a birthday card, or Exhibit A, which will probably be the woman at my daughter's ex-private school, Saks, who was just murdered 2 nights ago in her workplace with a security firm protecting a highly expensive elite private school, St Andrew's Cathedral School, right in the middle of Sydney CBD. She didn't even make it out of the change rooms of the water polo change room. She had a head bludgeoned in, and apparently he's thrown himself off a cliff and killed himself. And he was her workmate, who was a sporty type, nice young guy. I've looked him up on Facebook and found him today. Tijssen is his surname. They're calling him Tyson because he's Danish, but he's photographed outside crossing over George Street where the trams now are, crossing over to the nice old sandstone church that's sitting straight in front of St Andrew's Cathedral School, which is an ugly building, Pebble Creek building behind it. But anyway, hardly relevant. Well, it is relevant though, isn't it? Because 2 women a week on average every week in Australia are murdered by men, and 2 women a week do not murder men. And you look around the world and it's official, 97% of all rapes, all wars and all murders are men. They are the problem. Not all of them. But like I said, again, said before, here we go again. All kookaburras are birds. Not all birds are kookaburras. 97% of rapists, warmongers and murderers are male. Not all males are warmongering rapists and murderers. It's very simple. But they are the problem. And I am fucked if I'm going to keep having my children taken off me after I did everything right to escape them and had a sperm donor child and brought my child up and bought my own houses by myself, not a cent from my family, not getting an inheritance. My dad lost my mother's house, we got nothing. So he married a rich woman at Newport. My sister married a rich one at Avalon. My other sister was so poor she had to take an abandoned shack out the back of nowhere as a single mother with her child's father dying now of cancer by the looks of it. So there's no housing affordability for women. There's no childcare affordability for women. And then this, of course, is how the biggest growing cohort of homeless people in Australia is women in their 50s, because they're brought up children, they're thrown on the scrap heap. And in my case, total scrap heap now with AVOs against me for trying to see my own children when no one's enforcing their family law court right for me to see them. So I go out of desperation, get an AVO put on me, so now I can't get work. I mean, it's just... I am going to change the law by the time I'm done here. And if I can cross-examine Carolyn Quadrio and win in front of my child's independent children's lawyer, and she was a senior counsel by the name of Rachel Dart, D-A-R-T. Look her up. She's just come back from maternity leave half a year ago, apparently. She's young, and she was sent by legal aid because I made such a banging, stinking racket about how unfair this situation was. And she gave me time with my child back, and then, of course, barely a year later, I collapsed from a total nervous breakdown, and they've just used that as an excuse to pull my children from me ever since. They're bombing children. 50% of Gaza Strip are children. They're saying, well, we're giving them time to move out of the way. There's nowhere for them to fucking go. They're packed in like a bunch of sardines into a place that's apparently half the size of Canberra. And our Prime Minister, who I've always voted for, is over there backing up the US, saying we're going to back up Israel. Fuck that shit. Israel's perpetrating a Holocaust on the people in the Gaza Strip. Yeah, Hamas did some really fucking disgusting things, stealing Israelis and taking them hostage. It's not like those children are representative of Hamas. How dare they make them pay for that? Men are the problem. Goodbye.